Om Sudhismriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad-padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. We are continuing the discussion on this important foundational text of Vedanta, Vivekachudamani. And those of you who may have attended the last session may remember that we just started discussion on the 135th verse, so I'm going to continue that. So this again is a description of the Paramatman, Atman, Brahman, and so on, which we call different names. Jnada manohan kriti vikriyanam dehendriya pranakrida kriyanam ayognivattan anuvartamano na chestradeno vikarodi kinchana. Here the Atman is described as the detached witness of all that is going on in our mind. So, manaka ahankriti vikriyanam, dehendriya pranakrita kriyanam means all the activities of mind, emotional systems, thoughts, feelings, all these are happening, but they're happening only at the level of mind and senses. And there is a witness, a detached, a non-attached witness behind all this, which is the drashta, the seer, the perceiver of all this. Now, Vedanta tells us that this is our true identity. In other words, our true identity is not experienced when we walk, when you do different things with our senses of action and senses of perception. There is somebody, something which is beyond the transcendental reality, which is a witness behind all this. And that's our true identity. So normally when we identify ourselves, we identify only in terms of sthula indriya, sthula sharira, and senses, mind, emotion, feelings, and so on. This is how normally we identify our action, our words, our connections, our characteristics. All this we identify only at the level of our external senses and mind. And maybe at a higher level we may identify ourselves in terms of what we believe in, values, ideas that we uphold. So sthula and sukshma, these are two levels of our normal self-identification. This is my name, it means this is the name by which this body-mind complex is identified. If this is what I believe in, so there you go a little higher and you identify ourselves in terms of what we believe in, what the ideas and thoughts and higher ideas that we may try to represent. But in reality, Vedanta tells us that there is a witness which is uninvolved, which only the subject, the seer, the perceiver, not the actor, but the witness of the action that's going on. So that's the meaning of this verse, jnata, and it is known as jnata, the knower, not the known, the drashta, we call in Sanskrit, not drishya or drishtam, not what is seen, but the one who witnesses, the one who sees, perceives. And there's an example given, ayognivattan anuvartamano. So, aya means a piece of iron, that's what it's aya, piece of iron, a piece of cast iron, it's called aya. Agni means fire. Now, the fire may burn a piece of paper, cotton. It may also heat a piece of iron. But the fire itself is detached. It is not defined. Its actions, its properties are not modified or influenced by what it burns. Like that, Vedanta tells us that there is one reality which is called Atman. Now, one thing to be kept in mind, when we talk about Atman, Frequently when we try to understand, we may imagine that Atman is an entity. It's a name of something. After all, when we use a word, we have an idea in mind as to what we are talking about. So Atman is something that is known as Atman. But Atman is not what the particular word denotes. In other words, it is beyond description, it is beyond definition. It is beyond what you call verbalization. In Vedanta hermeneutics, there is an interesting principle which 500 years after Shankaracharya's passing away, a great Dominican priest in Germany, his name is Meister Eckhart, he somehow echoes this idea of what Shankaracharya explained and described in his books. And he lived in 8th century. Eckhart lived in 13th century Germany. He was perhaps the greatest mystic in Christian tradition. So he said that God cannot be defined in terms of name and form, or even to call God defined or to understand or try to understand God in terms of the typical well-known Christian theological trinity, Father, Son and Holy Ghost. And he says that itself is a blasphemy, because if you define something, that becomes limited. When you describe something, then it becomes limited. It's no more infinite. The infinite can never be defined. So in Vedanta, there is one principle, that is, the absolute reality we call Atman cannot be defined or described. It is in Sanskrit language it is called Panja Sabda Pravritti, means 5 conditions of verbalization. Verbalization means trying to explain or trying to describe in terms of words. So how do we normally understand or try to describe something? We may describe, let's say, a flower, maybe white flower, yellow flower, red flower. So we try to describe it in terms of its characteristic, its color, so to speak. How do we describe a human being? You may describe him in terms of what he does. So the first category is guna. Guna means characteristic. It is red flower. The redness is the characteristic of the flower. So you describe a person as a musician or a gardener or a carpenter. You are trying to define him or try to explain him in terms of what he does, his actions. Or you may try to describe somebody who may be a friend of yours, or maybe he is my friend, or he my father, son, brother, and so on. Sambandha. So guna, karma, sambandha. And then there are different ways, other ways of understanding a person. So action, characteristic, and also relationship. There are certain things which cannot be described. You may say it's like sun or moon, You don't say, what is sun? You don't ask. So it has its own self-revealed characteristics. Now, these are some of the ways in which we try to understand different things in this world. So Atman cannot be called Atman, because when you say Atman is Atman, or Atman is defined by the word, it becomes finite, it becomes defined. That's why Shankaracharya has a very famous statement in one of his well-known commentaries called the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Bhashyam. Brihadaranyaka is the biggest Upanishad. He says, Yastu Atma Shabdasya iti paraha prayogaha Atma Shabda Pratayoho Atma Tattusya Paramarthado Avishayattu Jnabanatham Annitha Atmana Upasiditevam Avakshid. Anyways, I have tried to explain this. This is an important statement in ancient Sanskrit. So he says, Atma is not something that the particular word denotes in terms of dictionary meaning, or in terms of what it normally is understood in conventional usage. It is something that it is the essence, is our own Swarupa, in Sanskrit, Swarupa, our own true identity. You know, a person's name may be X, but the human being, the X, is not limited by that particular name, X, Y, Z, whatever it is. Because that human being transcends all possible verbalizations. So it is beyond everything. And then in terms of our human actions or activities, it is sometimes understood as the witness, as the non-attached seer, perceiver, drashta, etc. We already discussed this. We just started discussion of this subject, so we are just repeating that. So, next verse is na jayate, no mriyade, na vardhade, na kshiyade, na vikarodi nityaha viliyamanepi vamushyamashmin na liyate kumbha ivambaram soyam. So here is an interesting example given here. The space within a pot and the space outside. Also in Sanskrit it's called ghatakasha, means ghata sannivishta akasha. That is space that is confined within the pot. So when you place a pot in front of you, there is a space within the pot. We may imagine wrongly that that space within the pot is restricted or limited by the size of the pot. We may say the space within an empty glass is smaller than the space in a big jar. So like that we may try to explain or describe the space in terms of the small little vessels which act as a vehicle for this expression. But in reality, the space within the pot and the space outside the pot is a mahakasha, means a space, the universal space outside. They are not the same. They are not the same from an external perspective. We may say the big pot, there is a space within and the space outside. So we may wrongly imagine that space within the pot is different from the space outside. But in reality, they are the same. How do we understand? You break the pot, and pot doesn't exist all the time. It is something that you make. It may be another vessel, another big size or small size. Whatever it is, in reality, there is no distinction between the space outside, it's called the Mahakasha, Maha means Bhagi, universal space, and the space within the pot, Ghatakasha. Now, like that, we may imagine that we are like a pot which appears to be, which creates a space which may appear to be limited by the size of the pot. But actually we are beyond all that. We are the unlimited. Why? Because we are not born. This may appear to be very contradictory for those who are not familiar with Vedanta. Can somebody tells you are never born and you never die, you don't grow, you don't evolve, and you don't fall sick. You never go to the doctor, you never take medicine, you never eat food, and you never die. What is that you? That you cannot be the physical body. It certainly comes into existence. It grows, it evolves, it decays, it disappears, it dies out. So jayade, asti, vardhate, viparinamade, or apakshiyade, vinashyade. These are 6 changes that everything in this world, in this empirical world, is subject to. Everything. You can't think of anything in this world which is not limited by these 6 changes, called satvikaras. Vikara means changes. Something comes into existence. When birth itself shows that you are subject to changes. Birth in a normal sense means a transition from a state of empirical non-existence to a state of empirical existence. So it then grows, evolves, goes through different stages of youth, old age, middle age, old age, then death, and again in Vedanta we call rebirth. That's one part. So this goes on, the 6 changes. So this Atman na jayate, na mriyate, na vardhate, na kshyate, na vikaroti. It doesn't change, that vikaroti, and it never gets decayed. It never grows, it never evolves, it never dies. Why? It's never born. Something that's born alone can die. Because birth is nothing but a state of continuation of the journey from previous life. So this is an important point in Vedanta. So in all, most of the spiritual traditions of Indian subcontinental origin, they believe in the law of karma and the doctrine of reincarnation. So when we are born, we are only coming from a previous existence. According to Vedanta, whatever we do in previous life cycles, they constitute our true internal or sukshma, subtle personality. Subtle personality has nothing to do with the physical form. Our samskaras and impressions that exist, that define, that regulate our actions and thoughts. So this is called some samskaras. So how do we identify samskaras? There are certain tendencies that we are born with. And when we go to a place, when we do certain things, we feel a kind of, maybe some kind of a mysterious feeling of previous acquaintance, deja vu called in French language called. Some kind of a feeling, homely feeling. And people born with certain inborn tendencies and characteristics. There's supposed to be some of the proof to show that life is not just one chance. It's a continuing flow. So in that sense, body is born, but Atman continues its journey through different body-mind complexes from one life to another life. This continues. So viliyamanebi vamushvimasmin naliyate kumbhaivaambaram soyam. So the pot may break, but the space within the pot doesn't disappear. It merges with the outer space. So Ghadakasha merges with the Mahakasha. Maha means universal, unrestricted space. It is there and it appears to be limited. Why? It doesn't get really limited, but it appears to be limited. And when you break the pot, again it merges with the universal space. So this is an example given in 136th verse. And this continues. Prakriti vikriti bhinna shuddha bhuta subhava sad asad idam asesham bhasayan nirvishesha vilasati paramatma jagradadishu avasthasu aham idi sakshar sakshirupena buddhehi. Here again, our true identity is explained in terms of the triple levels of human consciousness. That is waking state called Jagra state, dream state called Swapna state, and Sushupti is called dreamless or deep sleep state. So this is again another important way of understanding our own true identity. So when we live in waking state, we do things physically at the gross level. When we walk, we use our mind and our senses of action. We walk, we do things, we think with mind again, we travel. All this happen in waking state. But in dream also we walk. In dream also we walk in the street. We see the sunlight. We eat food. All this we do in dream state. But in dream, All these are done at the mental level. So when we do something without involving the senses as in waking state, when we don't involve the senses and when things happen at the mental level, it is called sukshma, subtle experiences. So there is certainly a difference between what we experience in waking state and what we experience in dream state. But at the same time, we can never have a single dream experience which has nothing to do with waking state. That's another important principle. On the one hand, dreams are not repetitions of, or not duplications of waking state experiences. But at the same time, we can never have a dream for which we have done something by way of preparing, which is totally separate from waking state actions. This is important. If you walk in the street and want to buy something, you postpone, maybe that night we may dream of buying that. Also unrealistic dreams can happen, but there is always some connection between what we thought, what we imagined, what we did, what we spoke in waking state and what we experience in dream state. And in deep sleep state called sushupti, jagra sopna sushupti, avasthasu. So you can find in this verse, the statement here, vilasati paramatma jagradadishu avasthasu. So these three states, avastha means state of consciousness. So these three states, we exist. In waking state we exist, in dream state we exist. The same Atman, the same witness, the same experiencer, same seer, witness, existed in dream state. That's why we are able to remember dreams. If the dreaming person and the person who is living in waking state are totally different, then no one will be able to remember any kind of dream. And Vedanta tells you that in the other third state, which is the basis of all, in Sushupti, also we exist, but our ability to experience things get benumbed. They become non-functional. So at that time, when we are in deep sleep, so we call Sushupti or deep sleep, we don't experience. But the effect of our deep sleep experience can be very easily experienced after waking up. That's why people feel rested. Dreamless sleep or sushupti is the only state in which we get complete sleep. According to Vedanta, the two states in which we get complete restfulness is in samadhi, where we transcend the three states, or in sushupti, deep sleep. Why? When we don't experience anything other than our own consciousness, then only we actually feel rested. People will go mad if they don't get deep sleep. So when you go to a doctor, you say, I'm not getting enough sleep. You don't say you are not getting enough dreams. Dreams can even make people tired and fatigued. If their nightmares can create problems for the mind and body. But because nightmares and dreams also, we have somebody else other than us. We are the subject-object distinctions are very clearly experienced in dreams. And also in waking state. In waking state also. When we are living in this world where we can't be so many things around, that make our mind fatigued or tired or creates botherations. But in deep sleep, in dreamless sleep, this Dvaita is called Dvaita Spandanam. That duality is completely shut down, totally is transcended. So we get restfulness or rested. Now, Vedanta tells you and Shankaracharya tells you that in this Jagradadishu avasthasu, Aham aham idi sakshat sakshi rupena buddhi. So there is a sakshi. Sakshi means witness. Sakshi, witness, to be witness, you should have experienced what you have witnessed, what you are a witness of. At the same time, you should be detached from what you have witnessed. So, bodhutvam and audasinyatvam. Bodhutvam is awareness of what you have seen. At the same time, you are not involved. Then only you can be called a witness. So, this Atman is a witness. It is present in waking, in dream, and also in deep sleep states. But it is Sakshi, it is uninvolved. And if we can really identify ourselves with this Sakshi dimension, the witness dimension of our own personality, you find you can have a lot of peace of mind. People lose the peace of mind. They get crazy about every small little things in this world because they identify themselves with everything. We have to identify, of course, when you live in this world, you have to show full dedication, complete identification to do any work effectively. It needs a lot of concentration, a lot of total identification, sincerity, integrity, which involves participation. So you cannot be witness. That's true. But then we can come back to our own witness dimension after the work is over. So when the effect of the anxiety linked to a work bothers our mind, then we can remind ourselves of our own true identity, Atman. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to sit in a cave, grow a beard, nothing of the kind. But it means this is our true reality. In fact, Vedanta, in Advaita Vedanta of Shankaracharya, you just know the reality of your own identity, then the problem solved. All prayers or pujas, any kind of religious, spiritual disciplines that we normally, ritual we practice, these are all so many ways, so many means, so many methods to eventually identify with our own true Swarupa or identity. That is, we are witness. This idea behind. So here Shankaracharya said, Aham Aham, I. Who is the real I? The real I is not the body. If we be very miserable if we identify ourselves with this human body. Absolutely. Some people are 6 feet, some people are 7 feet. Some people are short. So if we identify with what the human body, which is after all made of 5 elements, which may fall sick, which may die, which will be pushed through the tube in the crematorium, and not everything, the story over. If we are such a small little entities, we just come to this world, maybe live for 100 years if we eat organic food and go to gymnasium every day. And still, at the end of the day, push through the tube, everything's over. But Shankaracharya says, we are something much more than that. It's like a billionaire who suddenly starts thinking he's a pauper, he's bankrupt, and he goes about begging in the streets. So we have forgotten our true identity, the Atman. So we bring ourselves to this low level of identifying ourselves with this physical body which comes and goes. Or maybe mind and intellect, which also are subject to changes. Mind is never happy all the time. Now happy, next minute unhappy, again becoming happy again. So it continues flux, changing. It never remains the same. So in Vedanta, anything that undergoes change, anything which is inconsistent, anything which doesn't remain the same in the past, present and future, that cannot be the reality, the true reality. That may be called Vyavaharika Satta, the empirical reality, the everyday experience, which is only a fraction of our true personality, not even real personality. So that's why Bhashikara says, if we can think of our own aham, who is the real I, who is going through these triple states of consciousness, waking, dream and deep sleep, then you understand it is saksha sakshirupena. It is a witness. Buddhehe. Buddhehe sakshi means it is even the witness of intellect, the Atman. The same idea you find continues in so many different ways. Next 138. But you find in 139 this miserable state of a human being, not able to understand his own true identity. That is explained in graphic language in the 139th, which is actually the answer to the question. So you have to remember the entire text Vivekachudamani is built around 7 questions that a student is asking his teacher, and the teacher's answers to these 7 questions. That comes in the, I think the 51st verse, it comes, Ko nama bandha kadamesha kadhaka kadam padishthasya kadam vimoksha koso anatma paramaka atma tayo vibega kadamedat uchyadam. This is, I think, the 51st verse of the entire text. It comes there. Ko nama bandha kadamesha kadhaka. So the first question is, Ko nama bandha, what is this bondage? Now one may wonder, what is this bondage? Why should we call this a bondage? So Vedanta tells you that you feel a kind of dissatisfaction or discontent. If you are not fully satisfied with what is available, the phenomenal exchange material world, only when we reach a higher level of evolution. If you are very primitive, then nobody will worry about any problem. Everything, even animals have no problem. So there are many people. So Vedanta tells you that when we evolve further, going beyond the empirical worldly things, then you start thinking, well, is it enough if you have maybe a rich person, lot of money, wealth, job, but it's not possible for everyone. But when you become spiritually evolved, then we start thinking, well, is there something beyond this empirical, this limited, this changing, the impermanent things? Whatever we experience disappears tomorrow. It's a matter of time only. Body perishes, mind also gets exhausted, intellect also gets bored. So body, mind and intellect, they also go through different changes, different moods, also feel some kind of dissatisfaction. But that can come only to people who are slightly evolved to a higher level. Now, when they feel this incompleteness, kind of internal incompleteness, and that is called bandha, or that is called bondage. So bondage is not physical bondage or anything. Maybe the master of a number of slaves can also be in a state of bondage. So bondage is not physical bondage. You may be totally free in terms of physical activities, but mind is worried, anxious, depression. So there is no freedom in the mind. That is bondage. When you don't have contentment, that shows there is a bondage, there is a problem. When we have everything that we can aspire for, still there is no real contentment. That's called bondage. Now, this state of situation is explained in one of the most graphic descriptions in the 139th verse. Then we will come back to 138th verse. Atra anatmani ahamidi madir bandha eshusya pumsa prapto jnana janana marana klesha sampada hetuhu yenaivayam vapu tidam asat satyamityatma buddhya pushyati ukshati avati Vishayistandubhi kosha krudvat. So, then the previous verse also very important. Niyamida manasamum tum sumatmanam atmanyayam ahamiti saksha vidhi buddhi prasadat jani marana taranga apara samsara sindhum pratara bhava kudartho brahmarubena samstha. There is a statement of pratara, I mean get out of this terrible prison. That is 138 verse, pratara. Get out of this terrible place. Again, this place may be very wonderful. So Sri Ramakrishna in 19th century explained the situation in a funny, in the language of parable, a metaphor. So he talks about a fisherman going to catch fish in the seashore, maybe. And there are different types of varieties of fish perhaps. So some fish get caught. But once they are caught, they feel there's a problem here. Not a very pleasant place to be caught in a net. Because it may know that's going to be cooked and eaten. So not a very pleasant experience. So it may try to jump out of the net. And some clever varieties may succeed in getting out of the net. And there are others who may strive but don't succeed much. At least some varieties of fish may realize that's not a very, very wonderful place to be caught in a net and be eaten. So we'll make an attempt to get out, but not always succeed. And there are some others who are very happy, this is a wonderful place to live, this net. And also when they are later cooked, those they will go. Only when they feel the heat, they may realize, well, it's certainly not as good as we all imagined. Now, Shankaracharya says, pratara, get out of this net. Before that, I will discuss the 139th verse. There is an interesting metaphor. It's a very graphic metaphor. Yenaivayam vapuridam asat satyamityatma buddhya pushyadi ukshati avati. Vishayistandubhi kosha krudvat. So we give our food, we give our body a lot of good things. Good food, exercise, organic food, gymnasium, wonderful Medicare. But then after 100 years, it won't be worth maintenance, money meant for maintenance. So it pushed to the tube when it reaches its destination. Body is gone. But before that, we all the time, energy, resources are spent giving it, this body, wonderful food. And then ukshati means bathing. This this struggle to reverse the metabolism of the body. Trying to blacken the hair and whiten the teeth. And then avati, protecting. This is what we do our whole life. Now there is an interesting metaphor here. So there is it is the Chandrasekhara Saraswati, the Sringeri Shankaracharya, who wrote a commentary, Sanskrit commentary on this Vivekachudamani. The only commentary, the well-known commentary that exists on this book is this Sringeri Shankaracharya, Chandrasekhara Saraswati's, Chandrasekhara Bharati's commentary on this Vivekachudamani. He brings out a very wonderful verse. We don't know the source of the verse, but it's very apt and very graphic. He says, Krosha krimit tandubhiratma deham aveshtya guptimichan swayam vinirgantum ashakta evasan tadastadandar mriyatecha lagnaha. So the spider, the story from the spider, tandubhiratma deham, this spider, it weaves a web, some kind of a net, from its own body. It doesn't collect this raw material from outside. It creates a kind of net and it lives within that. But how does he weave this net? Atmadeham aveshti cha aveshti gupti michi. So he wants protection, wants to live in a perfect condition with the total protection. And then it brings out this tantava, means threads from its own body. This simile, this metaphor is also found in the Upanishads, of course. Also, Upanishads also give this Mundaka and all that. And others, there are references. Sometimes in some Upanishads there is a clear description also. So, Swayam vinirgantum ashakta evas. And finally it cannot get out of its own net. So it creates its own net from its own body. Then it gets self-imprisoned. And it finally, it finds it very difficult to get out of the net. Swayam vinirgantum ashakta evasan. It cannot come out of that net. Tadastad antarmriyate chalaknaha. Finally, it gets killed within the net itself. So, this is the predicament of human life. Now remember, Vedanta is not a very pessimistic, life-negating, world-negating, cynical philosophy. We should never get away with that wrong impression. Vedanta is trying to throw the flashlight into certain dark corners of our own life, so that we can understand, we can learn better, we can be more intelligent when we live in this world. So that's the idea behind. So all these examples and parables and metaphors are meant to give us higher wisdom, to teach us to look at life as a whole from a higher perspective, so that when we live in this world, when we have wonderful things, we should always remember they are not going to last for too long. That simple understanding is the only message that comes from Vedanta. Vedanta is very realistic. It is not an utopian, not a life-negating, not a world-negating, not a cynical, pessimistic ideal. It is a very positive, but it is not hollow like the modern positive thinking and, this motivational speech, not that sort of thing. That only gives you a little, it's just like a drug. Drug may give the impression you have reached somewhere, but only you come back again, you need another drug to come back to again to raise it. So it is not a kind of trick to give the wrong impression that we have solved all the problems. No. It only makes us more level-headed. Even while living in this world, when we are working in our office, when holding important positions, when we are dealing with responsibilities and life situations which may create anxieties and worries, and also the fatigue of holding bigger responsibilities. In the midst of all that, we can be very level-headed, we can remain calm and quiet and use all our energy, conserve our energy and use all our resources to solve the problems of life and succeed in life. That's the only purpose of Vedanta. So in this respect, Swami Vivekananda coined the expression practical Vedanta. Vedanta is very practical. It is not postponement of problems, but it is not self-deceiving, self-deceptive, running away from problems. But rather it is the art of looking at problem from a more intelligent perspective. That's why atra aham atmani ahamidi madir bentha esosya bhumsaha. So we always imagine that this body is our true identity. No, that is wrong. So I am this body. So this wrong identity is bondage. And this bondage is the result of our own ignorance of our own true identity. Praptaha ajnanat janana marana klesha sampada hetu. And again, as a result of this, we travel from one life, then death, rebirth, next life, again suffering and enjoying. No life can be exclusively a life of enjoyment. Life is always a combination, an unbroken succession of pain and pleasure. I mean, janana, marana, and punarjanma, etc. I mean, life, death, rebirth, suffering, enjoying, again suffering, again enjoying. Now what happens is, this wrong notion makes us believe that this body is our true identity. So like spider, or maybe some silkworm also. The simile can also be apt for a silkworm, which also produces its own thread from its own body and then creates a net around itself, remains within, cannot come out, and dies and disappears. Its own creation. Why? Once we start thinking that we are only the physical body, then this problem begins. Once we realize that, well, physical body is just one insignificant part of it, I have a higher identity which is not physical. At that moment, this bondage is gone. That's why the previous verse is actually, it's a background, but it's a continuation of the same idea. Niyamidamana swamam tum swatma. So I've already explained the jani, marana, taranga, apara, samsara, sindhum. The ocean is described here. Jani, marana, taranga. So birth, death, rebirth. So this is like a wave, like waves in an ocean. Apara sindhum, a huge vast ocean. And this ocean should be crossed over. You should get across this ocean, pratada, bhava kridarthaka brahma rupena samstha. Kridartha means a state of mind when we feel we have done what we ought to do. So that state of kridarthada can come in so many different ways. Even when you make a little effort in the right direction, that creates a kind of internal satisfaction, contentment, that's called kridarthada. Such a person is called kridartha. A person who attained this goal. I think we have about 10 minutes for interaction. You are most welcome to ask any question that you want. You are absolutely, I mean, anything that I discussed, anything which I did not discuss, you are most welcome to ask questions. Thank you. Yeah, best welcome. Come. Please bring me the mic. Yeah.
So Maharaj, last you mentioned about kritarthata.
Yeah.
So if you are to apply in daily life, how do we apply that? Like, okay, I do not identify with the role I am doing daily, but I'm just doing as it's a nature or whatever samskara I was born with. So is that the good direction?
So I'll explain. So thank you. So kridartha means person who has attained, kritaha, achieved, have done what he wants. His supreme spiritual goal he has achieved. That's a literal meaning. Now this is the highest sense of this term, but it has got different phases, different interpretations. Even in your life, when you do something which is beneficial to you, truly beneficial, you feel a kind of internal contentment. You don't you think so? Even when you do something which an action, the right direction, and you feel, well, no, I have done something. That's one aspect of kridarthada. So kridarthada has got many, many different levels of interpretation. The highest one is even mukta. That is not necessarily the only interpretation. Even in our own daily life activities, when we take a responsibility, when we are expected to do something, and when we try to do that, even we may not even succeed in fully doing it, but when we make a real effort to do what we are supposed to do, that action will produce a spark of inner contentment. Don't you think so? That is one example, Kritartha. And at different level, when we attain certain things, that also will have this sense of contentment. So Kritarthata in its ordinary sense means you feel a kind of inner contentment, and that makes your mind free. You experience a kind of inner freedom, lightness. Some heavy load is taken off your shoulders. Or even if you are not able to do it, you make a sincere attempt to do it. May not succeed. Tomorrow you may succeed. But even an attempt to do that will produce a very explicit feeling of inner contentment. That is an example of Kritartha. It's clear to you? Oh, thank you.
Swamiji, you spoke about the different kinds of fishes feeling different kinds of things when they are caught in a net.
Yeah.
How does that find relevance in our body, or in ourselves, experiencing things as part of a simulation rather than it just being part of everything that, what I'm trying to say is, how do we associate that with the notion that whatever we feel in this life is probably, or in this physical world, is just an insignificant portion of our higher purpose that we are probably supposed to serve?
Are you referring to Sri Ramakrishna's parable? Or are you referring to the example of a huge ocean of life, death and rebirth, and the verse which tells you to get out of this? What are you actually referring to? Can you specify?
I'm trying to understand the connection between that anecdote and what you discussed in the end.
The two parable and okay.
Yes.
These are two different verses.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Two different verses. And in fact, the parable which I gave is linked to these different levels of spiritual aspirants. In our life, we were talking about contentment, and I was mentioning that this kind of higher discontentment, higher dissatisfaction, that can come only to a person who is slightly evolved in spiritual life. Otherwise, nobody will feel this. In fact, the very idea of the bondage doesn't occur to everyone. So look at in that example, one variety of fish, it feels this terrible danger, and it jumps out of the net, and it retains its freedom. Another one realizes that it may be too late and is trapped. The third one doesn't even imagine, doesn't think that it is a bondage at all. So you find three different levels. So in among people, you find different levels of aspirations. There are those who believe, well, I should have a good job, I should have all these wonderful things, but also I need some higher ideal to live for. So you find such people. Maybe the vast majority of those who belong to this category, they want to live in this world, they want to have the good things of this world, it's perfectly okay. But they also want, there should be some higher purpose in human life. Maybe they are the majority. The highest may be a minority, the lowest also may be a minority. But the vast majority of people, given an opportunity, given a chance, they will try to aspire for something higher. They belong to this category of those who may not be able to jump out. So Vedanta will tell you that in their next life, they will realize earlier. See, Vedantic tradition, this law of karma and law of reincarnation, rebirth, are closely linked to our spiritual literature. That's a very scientific way of understanding. So, otherwise, how do you explain people with different tendencies, inborn tendencies? The same family, 5 brothers, 5 children, same education, same environment, but 5 totally different characteristics. How do you explain? So, even if you make the slightest effort to realize this bondage, that effort, even if you don't succeed, that effort will produce some result, if not in this life, next life. So Lord Krishna says in the Gita, Purvabhyasena tenaiva khriyadesi avachopi sakha jijnasiravi yogasya sabda brahmadi vartate. Purvabhyasa means your previous efforts, your previous experiences coming from previous life cycles, which is called samskaras. Samskaras are strong inborn tendencies. He cannot disown them. He cannot deny. So, those samskaras, they are positive samskaras, as a result of positive activities, actions, will help you to continue a spiritual journey from where you are left behind this life and next life. So, people belong to these 3 different levels of spiritual evolution. Those who realize, a man like Shankara, 6-year-old, you realize this. For him, it is difficult for him to live, think that the world is real. Sri Ramakrishna. For him, every day, every minute, he was realizing the impermanence of all these empirical things and meditating on the transcendental. There are people who may realize this little later. Sometime, if not in this life, next life. That's the idea. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Swamiji, one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned, the state of dream versus the waking state. In the waking state, it's easy to sort of, distinguish between good and bad. In the dream state, you have a little less control because it kind of manifests itself in many different ways. A lot of things are random sometimes. In Advaita, how do you sort of like take some of those, how do you interpret dreams? Are you supposed to interpret dreams, or are you supposed to just sort of let them go? Because there are some theories where dreams are kind of a manifestation of what's in your subconscious coming out. And so how do you sort of manage that, and what does Advaita sort of talk about?
Yeah. So, I emphasized the point that dream experiences cannot be the exact repetitions or duplications of waking state experiences. But there is similarity. There is a connection. The difference is this. In waking state, we are doing things in a gross manner, which means mind and the senses of action, senses of perception are directly involved. Especially senses of action are involved. You walk using your feet. In dream also you run. But then the running also happens without using your feet. Mentally you are running. So everything happens at the mental level. So one is gross, the other is subtle. Subtle means mind alone is involved, senses are not involved. The point is, dream experiences can be totally different. Externally, there will be some internal connection. That's why we gather impressions and deposit them at the subconscious level. And in dream, you don't have control. In waking state, you can be in control of your own actions. You can decide what I'm going to speak. You can decide you're going to drive to the right side or left side. It's your decision during waking state. But in dream state, mind just mechanically follows a pattern, and that pattern has a most inseparable connection with waking state experiences, though they are not exactly similar. So the thought you may have in dream, you may have sown the seed for that in waking state. We can never have any dream experience which is totally detached, separate from waking state. We have created a background in waking state, and that waking state experiences take a subtle form, not physical, non-physical, mental, psychological form. And there everything is fulfilled as soon as you think. You go to New York, the moment you think, you have reached New York in dream. Here, 6 hours you have to fly. So all those differences are there. Sthula, Sukshma Bheda, like that, Desha, Kala Bheda. Desha means this you are going to sleep here, you imagine you are reached somewhere else. Then Kala, time difference, then subtle, gross difference, all these differences are there. They cannot be the same, but they are certainly related. So what you said, the answer is this: in dream everything is at a mental level. So when the idea comes, you have done it. Everything is in a flash, everything like a vritti, it comes. A feel, a thought comes.
So that then, if you want to sort of like get away from unpleasant experiences in your dream, you kind of start in the waking state, and that'll sort of
There's a very simple method. So before anyone goes to sleep, he can connect his mind with something positive. The mind may have already connected the whole day with so many positive, negative, good and bad, all sorts of a bundle of different samskaras, different thought currents and imageries we have already gathered during waking state. Before going to sleep, if we can connect our mind either by reading a good book, spiritual book, listening to a good music that you like, spiritually elevating music, there are the music thing that can totally drive you crazy, but then you will have nightmares in dream. But music or songs or books or ideas and discussions, somehow feeding the mind with some good spiritual food, that may influence the mind, and mind may have peaceful sleep. This is one way to do that. Mind should be given proper food. Whatever we think or do in waking state is a kind of food, not only the body but also mind also. A thought is a food for the mind. An imagination, an idea is like food for the mind. It remains there, it doesn't go, it doesn't come out, it remains there. And it may manifest in different kinds of dreams, also in dreaming state. So the only way out is to give some good food to the mind in waking state. If you give some good food, then toxic food that it may have gathered of its own, its intensity will be reduced. That's the idea. Thank you. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So we'll. I think we have some very important announcements. I want to announcement. So, please remember there will be no class next Friday, next few weeks. So please note that there will be no Vivekachudamani classes for the next few weeks due to special events. The class will resume on Friday, March 6th, 7:30 p.m. So please remember we have an important celebration, Shivaratri. Shivaratri will be celebrated on Sunday, February the 15th at 7:30 p.m. The venue will be the new temple. Our new temple is 2323 Velago Street, San Francisco, 4 blocks away from here. On Sunday, February 15th, we'll observe Shivaratri, the sacred night dedicated to Lord Shiva, with a worship service beginning at 7:30 p.m. at the new temple, following refreshments. The program will continue in the auditorium from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. and will include chanting, readings and meditation. Sri Ramakrishna's birthday celebration. So remember, this coming Friday, day after tomorrow, we have Sivaratri, time 7:30 p.m. in the evening. The new temple, that is 2323 Velago Street, San Francisco, 4 blocks away from here, 7:30 p.m. in the evening. So, okay, then there is another important celebration, Sri Ramakrishna's birthday celebration, Saturday, February 21st. Time is 10 a.m. Again venue, new temple, 2323 Velago Street, San Francisco, 4 blocks away from here. A special worship will be held in honor of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. The program will include meditation, chanting, devotional music, and flower offerings by devotees, followed by prasad luncheon. So more information you can see svedanta.org website, svedanta.org. Or you can just Google Vedanta Society San Francisco, will get you to our website. So remember, you are most welcome to attend Shivaratri 15th February, Sunday, 7:30 p.m. at the new temple, Velago Street. And then Sri Ramakrishna's birthday celebration, Saturday, February the 21st. Saturday, February the 21st. Puja will begin at 10 a.m. So there will be meditation, chanting, devotional music, or reading from scriptures, followed by prasad luncheon. The program will be over before 2 o'clock. And for more information, you can see our website, svedanta.org. So the next class will be on March 6th, 7:30 p.m. Okay, thank you.